Welcome, everybody. Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening. This is Spirit Matters. If you just joined us in the last 2 weeks for the first time, you have no idea who I am, and you're wondering, why is there a new voice on this podcast? Actually, I'm one of the originals.
Right.
Boom.
OG.
OG. My name is Dal Grung. I'm here with the Chuta Gopi. And our tri-host, Kishore, is not here this morning. He's not able to join us. But I've been in London for a little bit, and I just got back to New York City, and I'm happy to be back with all of you. And it's wonderful to be here. How have things been at you? Do you have to update me on how things have been?
We've been good, feeling pretty consistently like sheltered. We've been getting through it. We've been talking about some really great points.
Getting through it. It's consistently sheltered. It sounds like things are a mess.
In spiritual speak, that's actually a good thing.
It's a good
If
thing.
if we're not feeling sheltered and we're not getting through it, like if we're just like, oh no, we're coasting, and then we forget that we're feeling sheltered, that's kind of
Yeah.
when
I
like
was just I was just thinking of this week because I was thinking I was giving one of the things that the main thing I was doing in London was I was filming a course on the Bhagavad Gita. So I was
nice.
reading a lot of the Gita and like discussing the flow of the Gita. And the course was designed for anybody to appreciate, even if you don't have any familiarity with the Gita. And so the Gita goes everywhere from like the broadest reaching, principles of basic spirituality all the way to like the deepest heart of like love for God as a person and like individual relationship and like into every moment of your life, and everything in between. And so it's like, how do you walk that line of just like giving somebody enough interest, but without compromising on the depth of what's being offered? And one of the things that just comes up often in the Gita is just the idea of just, obviously being the difference between spirit and matter. No pun on our spirit matters, but the
Well,
difference between
every pun intended.
ev- every pun intended. I like that's my new one, pun intended. But the idea that that we're spirit souls and we're not the body, and then there was this constant theme of like the happiness and joy we're looking for in this world just doesn't exist here.
Mm.
And the one thing in the back of my mind was like, don't be pessimistic. Like people just at a certain point just feel like when you're just like this world is full of suffering, et cetera. And it's like, come on. Then I was realizing that like you can't win because either way you go, it's like on one hand, like the most common spiritual question is like, why is there evil in the world? Why does suffering exist, right? And then if you try to say, well, it's like actually there's a plan and there's like higher purpose and it's not real, suffering, and you try to give like a certain answer, it's like, well, you're just denying the fact there's intense suffering. It doesn't make sense to people. And then if you like try to tell people that like the world is full of suffering, actually, we got to get out of here. They're like, it's actually not so bad. Why are you so down on everything? Why are you trying to like life is good? Like there is love in this world, etc. And it's like, okay. And then it's like you go back and forth and you just can't satisfy either way. And I'm like, pick which one you're trying to solve. Is it suffering in the world or is everything great? And I just think that the reality is materially everything's a mess and spiritually everything is right where it's supposed to be.
And I think that's a good way to look at it because I kind of think that that is exactly what happens. And we have to kind of understand that just because there is suffering and a plan does not negate the feeling of the suffering. Like
Yeah.
simply giving a diagnosis does not mean that we've solved your illness.
Mm.
Given a name to it, but we haven't started treatment yet. And I feel like that's how we are spiritually. We're still we're like trying to figure out like what is the deal, what is the deal, what is the deal, what is the deal with me, and we're like, okay, this is the deal with you. It doesn't automatically take away all that you felt and are going through. Conversely, just saying that there is deep suffering in the world is stating truth, not necessarily a condemnation of people who are
Mm.
trying to gather happiness through connections and in any way that they can, because that is a natural function of a soul, is
Mm.
to gather and garner that happiness in any way that they can.
Hmm.
And usually it comes out through acts of service. A lot of times it comes out through service. So just saying that, okay, here's the diagnosis. Like if a doctor comes and they're saying, oh my goodness, like, I'm really sorry, you've got a chronic illness. They're not, most people, they take some time and they're not just like, okay, doc, you know what? Why you got to be so down? Why have you robbed me? of
Mm,
every spot of joy. We kind of understand that, okay, this is a diagnosis. Now it's up to me on how I take that and how I conduct my time. And so it's the same way with us spiritually. And I think it's so important while going through the Bhagavad Gita to really think about that. The fact that there two things can be true at once. This
mm.
place can be a mess, but still we can be bright spots in the mess.
You're such a bright spot in the mess of my life.
You, you
Thank
are a
you.
bright spot.
You're a bright spot. That's a great pickup line. You guys can borrow that one anytime you want.
You're
You are
welcome.
a bright spot in the mess of my life. And if anybody says, if anybody's attracted to that, like, okay, yeah, I will be the bright spot in the mess of your life. Think about why you're attracted to messes.
You should carry red flags in your back pocket. And then when they're like, oh my God, that sounds so amazing, you whip out the red flag. You're like, that was a red flag.
That was a total red flag. My
Somebody
life's
comes
a
out
mess, but you
telling
bring
you,
brightness to it. Wow, 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 wow.
yeah, number one,
That's
if
when you hand them a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, say, read this and get back to me.
I mean, but yeah, if somebody comes out right out the bat and they don't know you, they know you for 2 seconds and they immediately start telling you that their life is a mess, maybe that's not the best opening line that we want to go with. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
But I
I
can
mean, it
fix
is.
them. I can make it better.
I am. I do have to like remind myself that on a daily basis that I'm like, Ajita, you cannot fix people. You have to allow the people to be people, which actually leads into our Bhagavad Gita verse today.
Ooh, I knew this was all coming back full circle. I know if I just kept blabbing about something, eventually Achita would bring it back to the Gita. That's how this works.
Pick up lines and the Bhagavad Gita.
Pick up lines in Bhagavad Gita.
So, text 47, Krishna
Text
said,
47. This is a good one. We're getting to a good section here.
that's why, yeah. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty.
Mm,
My sister says some of this a lot, and she kind of paraphrases it into a really short, concise statement, which is, you can pick your actions, but you can't pick the consequences.
I thought you were going to say you could pick your...
Your nose, but you
Can't pick
can't
your
pick
nose,
the
but you
consequences.
can't always know what's going to come out.
I mean, like there's that episode on The Simpsons, and Ralph is like, the doctor said my nose would stop bleeding if I didn't put my fingers in it. Like, yes. That yes. So yeah, we can pick our actions, but we can't always pick the reactions. We can't always pick the
Mm,
we can't
mm,
choose how someone is going to react to it. And usually that's what we are trying to control the most. Like when
mm.
people are like, why you gotta be so down? Why you gotta do so and all this stuff and blah 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 blah. It's like, well, okay, here there was an action. There's always cause and effect. So here was the action. You told me you're in a bit of suffering, and why is there suffering in the world and all these things.
Yeah.
Now the reaction, which is not even a consequence. Like when we think consequence, we don't really have a negative connotation toward it. Consequence means like something bad will happen,
Yeah.
something from something that we've done. But really, as a base word, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad word.
Consequence with continuity.
That's it.
Looking that up.
It
Look up,
has
somebody look up consequence. I'm looking it up.
it has like no, good or bad attached to it. It just is like a resultant action.
Consequent, following closely. I'm your consequence.
We should start signing letters. I remain your
I remain your ever consequence. I get that police song. Every breath you take, I'll be watching your consequence. It's like a band name. We're the consequence. Um, I was thinking of this word because I was looking at the Sanskrit of this word because it's very it's one thing that I like to do, and you get this a lot when you read Prabhupada's purports in Vedic literatures, is that you know what you're reading is also taken in context of the greater body of Vedic literatures itself. You look at like everything that's being said in Vedic literatures, and we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to understand like what is the essence, what's the point, what's it leading to. Those are even some of the questions asked at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where there are so many religious and spiritual scriptures written throughout time and history. Like, what is the essence of all of them? What is the greatest good? And so there are certain like words that get used often, like dharma, or the word here karma is being used, and the word karmanya eva karaste me paleshu kadachana makarma phala heturbur me te sangos tvakarmani. This is Sanskrit. That's for this verse 247. Karmanya evi karaste adhikar. You have the qualification. You are meant for karma, for action. And so a lot of the Gita is describing like what is karma. In the fourth chapter, Krishna will talk about how it's very difficult to understand the law of karma. And we think of law of karma as like just like action and reaction. So there's the two things. It's the law of reaction. It's not just the law of action, but it's the law of like how an action leads to reaction. And Krishna's talking so much about like freeing ourselves from karma. And Arjuna thinks, I free myself from karma by abstaining from action. And he's like, that's not the case. Like, you have to act. And he'll get into that in the third chapter. Like, you have to act. The way you free yourself from karma is not by abstaining from action, but it's by letting go of the ownership of the reactions, positive or negative. And so, like, Krishna's saying that, like, that's the real renunciation, is when I could act with full gusto, but recognize that it doesn't belong to me. Like, I'm not the controller of the outcome itself. And initially, Krishna is going to talk about in the next verse how that's the definition of yoga, how yoga means to be equipoised in what comes your way. But that's just the beginning step of it. He doesn't even at this point mention in 48 the idea of God or,
Yeah.
excuse me, Govinda, Chaitanya, Hare Krishna. He doesn't even mention the idea of like God or higher power, because the next question was like, well, why? What's the point? And then he gets into the idea of bhakti, elevated. It was like, it doesn't belong to you, but that doesn't mean it belongs to nobody. And therefore, it's the idea of connecting it to higher purpose, meaning like, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to somebody else. And then we become like a bank teller, where it's like you're dealing with money all day long. It doesn't belong to you, but it does belong to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and using that in rightful service. And so I was just kind of, for me, the word karma is being used here, and the karma phala, the fruits of that karma, like you have a right to perform action, your prescribed duty, specifically your dharma. He'll use the word later on, the swadharma, like your action in this world, but don't judge it based off of like what you think you'll gain as a result of it. And that calculated action, I think, is what creates so much anxiety for us in terms of what do I get from people? What do I get from this? As opposed to like, how could I give? And whatever I think I'm getting, whatever I think I'm going to get from holding on to that result isn't really going to give it to me. And I have to find a way to find it already in myself through my connection to higher power in order to actually be full enough that I can give without like trying to squeeze something out in return for everything.
And I think that, this it can be really it can be tricky to navigate, because unfortunately, like, what happens is you think, okay, maybe I should just learn to give without expecting anything in return. And there's a part where it's like, well, to be honest, this world is actually not built like that.
Mm,
There are very, very, very few places where you can do that safely in this world. And sometimes even spiritual communities is not one of them.
mm,
Like, there is an idea of, yes, which we spoke about a long time ago, where yes, um lend the money, but only do it if you have it to lend. Take a deep look inside yourself first. Count your own resources before you're able to give them out, because if they don't come back, will you be all right with it?
mm.
Like, will you be all right if there isn't the reciprocation that you think should come of it? Or even if you're going in and you have no thoughts of reciprocation, fine. Then you can give freely and with an open and receptive kind of heart. But check your own boundaries before you enter into a situation like that, because it is also okay to protect yourself. So, like, this verse also sounded a little bit, it can sound pessimistic or hopeful depending upon who you are and how you look at it.
Mm,
Because sometimes I feel like we think about this place and we're thinking, oh, I'll just do this and this and this, and it might fix the problems. Or I'll abstain from doing this, and that's going to fix this problem. And
mm,
kind of Krishna's like, nobody can really abstain from everything for very long. Everybody's doing something. And so, you might think, well, I'm going on a journey of nonviolence. And Krishna's about to say, that's impossible. It's impossible. Every time you breathe, you're killing living entities. It's impossible to get it's impossible to think I'm
mm,
just going to get out of the tangled web of action and reaction. I just
mm,
won't commit any more actions, and then there won't be reactions. And Krishna's, that's impossible. And so a soul can get really frustrated. Well, then what am I supposed to do? Like, if it's all impossible and it's a tangled web, what am I supposed to do? And Krishna's like, hold on, you're going to still act, because there's no such thing as like non-action or complete inactivity. But
mm.
he says,
But
if if you are not so deeply attached, it starts to change the mindset. It starts to change your heart. It starts to change your soul and the places from which you are acting. And then of
mm,
course Arjuna is going to get into like, well, why are we acting so much? And why are we doing these things? And what does a person situated look like? And how do they move? Because I'm feeling kind of miserable with this action and reaction process. So like, what am I supposed to do? And Krishna gives a hint here, and then he kind of takes a whole Bhagavad Gita to further elaborate. But it's kind of hopeful. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do if the world is completely a hot mess and there is
mm,
no getting out of this tangled web? It's like, you keep acting, keep going. And then we're like, well, but on what strength? On what faith? Later on, it's gonna come into, well, you act on the basis of pleasing me. You just stick with me, and I'll take care of all the other reactions.
mm. I'm sticking with you.
I mean, consequence. Dear Lord, I am
I'm
your
your
consequence.
consequence. Yeah. I think also the idea it's interesting, and we can wrap up here. We started late today, so we might wrap up at the same time, so it'll be a quick one today. But I was just thinking of the idea of so much of reaction, and I was in London, and I was talking with somebody, and the idea of FOMO was coming up, and how they deal with the idea of like wanting to go to everything, but it just being exhausting at a certain point, but like not being able to withhold, like not being able, like I need to stay back and just rest. I need to stay back and take care of stuff at home. I need to just like not go tonight, but I force myself every time because I just am so worried about missing out. And I think the real question we have is like, what am I afraid of missing out on? What do I really think is going to happen? If I go to X, Y, and Z or get included. And it's like, well, I'll find connection. I'll be included. I'll belong somewhere, and look at all those things. And then it's just like this really sharp, intelligent asking of like, do I really think that's going to happen as a result of A, B, and C? And so what Krishna's saying is like, don't be detached from the reactions, not because it's just like, you know, just because I tell you to, but it's like what you're really looking for is not found in any of those reactions. It's found over here with me. And so give all of that to me so that there's space for me to crowd into your heart. And so it's actually just saying like we actually do want certain reactions. We want love in our heart. We want Krishna's presence in our life. We want fulfillment and joy and peace and connection and belonging. And we live in this mindset that this unconscious mindset that it's at the end of the next whatever it is. And so Krishna is just kind of breaking that cycle for us and saying, first he's just saying like it's not there. That's, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, that's just truth. Like let's just break it down. What you're looking for is not here. It's kind of like you walk into sometimes you go into, like, you see a movie and you walk into a room and like there's people that got there before you did, and the whole room's turned upside down because they've been looking for something, and it's just like, it's not here. It's just not here, you know? And so then he's saying, it's not here. Trust me, it's over here. And then we'll get to that later on. But that's the time we have today if we stop at our normal time. We love you guys. For those who tune in live, we had a login problem earlier this morning, so we started late. So some of you gave up on us, and it's okay. We would have given up too if we weren't hosting. But we love you. We love you, and
We
we're
still
glad
have
that those
Kimberly.
are. Get Kimberly. Kimberly came back. She's like, boom, I'm here. I'm your
And
consequence.
Kimberly is our taker away.
These are takeaways. So what takeaways do you have, Kimberly? Leela
Thank
Munger's got
you.
some good stuff there.
Taken away to check your boundaries and don't abstain from action, but let go of ownership of reactions and connect to it from a higher purpose. And then my favorite one today was, Dear Lord, I am your consequence.
Consequence. Leela Mundry said, having a diagnosis is the same as having a treatment. To cure the mess of material life, we need actions, but not material action whose results fall on us. The difference is ownership of the consequences. Beautiful, beautiful. You have a final word of takeaway, Chutagopi, Davy?
You can choose your actions, but you can't choose the consequences.
You can choose the actions, but you can't choose the consequences.
Except for Krishna, he clearly chose me as a consequence. He knew what he was getting into when he came over here, so he's stuck with me.
He knows everything. He knows everything. There's that Huey Lewis in the News song. I'm so happy to be stuck with you. Can't you see? Can't you see that something stuck with me?
something, something. Those are official lyrics, by the way.
Those are official lyrics, yeah. Okay, guys, Lord, I'm your consequence. That's what I'm walking away with. Thank you guys so much. Grateful for you. Please be well. Please take care. We'll see you next time. Same time, same place, unless we don't.
Way to leave it open-ended.
We'll leave it open-ended. We love you.
Listen,
Take
we've
care.
got actions, but we don't know about the consequences.
We have actions. We have no ideas what the consequences are going to be. So, okay, guys, take care. Bye bye.